everyone, and welcome to the Tribal Environmental Summit. This is our surface water session. We're going to go ahead and get started with our first presenter, Robert Cook, and I'll just go ahead and introduce the rest of the speakers as well. That way we can just kind of keep rolling. Our other speakers will be Rachel with EPA Region 6, Jennifer Winterstein, EPA Region 8, and Kara Alexander with EPA Region 6. So we'll go ahead and get started with Robert Cook. Robert, the floor is yours.
Great, thank you, and thanks for the opportunity to be here with you today. So I'm going to spend just a little bit of time talking about the updates and findings from EPA's survey, the National Rivers and Streams Assessment. Okay, there we go. All right, so I can't really talk about the National Rivers and Streams Assessment without talking about kind of the larger scale studies that EPA does. And the National Rivers and Streams Assessment is a subcomponent or a component of the National Aquatic Resource Surveys. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the general surveys. Then I'm going to touch on the key findings from just the Rivers and Streams Assessment. And then if I have a little time, I'll give you some examples of the data visualization tools, because these have been recently developed and they're pretty slick. All right, so what are these EPA surveys, these National Aquatic Resource Surveys? It's 4 different surveys. There's a coastal survey, a wetlands, a lakes, and a rivers and streams. And so they operate, every 5 years. The rivers and streams, since it's so large and there are so many sample sites, it takes 2 years to complete. But what all these surveys do is they assess the biological and recreational condition of these water bodies and the change over time. We're now doing these enough to where we can make some conclusions in between surveys. So it documents the associations between indicators of condition and indicators of stress. So for instance, the fish community and an indicator of stress or something like nutrients. And it builds and enhances the monitoring and assessment capacity. So that's just generally what these are. As you can imagine, they're rather large in scale because they do cover the lower 48 states. Well, why on earth would we want to undertake such a huge thing like this? I mean, tribes, states, they have their own monitoring programs. Well, nationally, it's hard to combine all of those tribal and state programs and make some conclusions. And I'll touch on that in a moment. So this provides a national assessment, reports on degradation and risk posed by stressors at both the national and regional scale. It reports out on nutrient pollution and habitat protection efforts. We get data sets regarding algal toxins, and also a small part of each one of these surveys is method development. So maybe something kind of cutting edge. And so these surveys are almost like the proving ground for some of these methods. All right, this is all done using a random draw of sites. So the random draw is much like an election poll. You can't survey everybody as to how they're going to vote, but you can take a subsample, a random subsample, and then you can extrapolate that to the population. It's the same for these surveys. We take a random draw, representative of the streams, certain stream sizes, certain larger rivers, and we extrapolate that to all the streams and rivers in the lower 48. We have standardized field and lab protocols. So a person sampling in Washington State is sampling using the same protocols, and the same analytical methods are being used as somebody that's pulling a sample from Florida. So everything is uniform. And then we have nationally consistent and regionally relevant data interpretation, and I'll talk a little bit about that in the future. And of course, national QA and data management as well. So For instance, if there are 1,000 sites done for rivers and streams, each one of those sites was identical in terms of data collection and analytical methods run. And it isn't just a few water quality parameters. There are benthic macroinvertebrates, plant communities, especially for the wetlands, fish community, public health indicators. We'll take some fish tissue. Usually it's mercury that's run for that. Pathogens will be Enterococcus. Algal toxins will be run. We look at stressors like elevated nutrients, excess sediment, habitat. We'll do a full habitat evaluation to see any interruptions or alterations of the habitat. And then I talked a little bit about proving ground. So this is where we may start pulling in some things for contaminants of emerging concern. This may be like hormone or endocrine interrupters and other things of that nature. PFAS would be one as well. All right, so now we don't, we can't turn to a book and find benchmarks for all these. We can't open a book and say, all right, well, in Oklahoma, this is good for fish community, but in the neighboring state, that might not be the best. So we use reference sites in these ecoregions. And so your ecoregions are up here. So you'll have a set of reference conditions for this ecoregion, set of reference for this ecoregion, and so on. And so we use those reference conditions to give us an idea of what is good condition, what is fair condition, and what is poor condition. So if you look here, nationally for macroinvertebrates, using all these combined ecoregions, about 28% of the macroinvertebrates are in good condition, 25 are fair, and then 46 are in poor condition. All right, so before I start talking a little bit more about 2013-2014 National Rivers and Streams Assessment, I want to come back and talk about why is EPA doing this? As you know, through your monitoring programs are not uniform across the board with everybody else. I mean, you may be collecting some similar parameters, but your frequency may be different. Some of your parameters may be different, and that's the same for the states as well. Not everybody is using the same frequency. Some of the methods are different. And then in terms of data evaluation, not all states and tribes have the same standards. So they may evaluate something like dissolved oxygen differently. And so that makes it very difficult to report out nationally with different standards and different methods. It's just very hard to bind that up in a nice, neat package and say nationally, this is what's going on. And that is not a slight at all to state or tribal programs. Those state and tribal programs are designed for one purpose, and that's to inform the waters of which they prioritize. And then this national assessment, using that random draw, we can make things a little more uniform. So it's just a different purpose between the monitoring programs. But I just wanted to go in a little bit more into why EPA does these national surveys. All right, so let's talk about results from the 2013-2014. You may be saying 2013-2014, that was so 7 years ago. Well, it was. That's when the field work was done. The report for this came out just a few months ago. It was actually done for a while. It just sometimes these things get held up. Philip, I saw your message, and I absolutely will address that. So results from 2013-2014. All right. So to give you an idea, EPA has been doing some version of this survey since 2004. We just completed the 2018 and 2019. I imagine those results will be out in a couple years. But concentrating on 13 and 14, survey crews sampled almost 2,000 river and stream sites. Remember, I told you that it took 2 years, and that's why this particular survey takes 2 years. Again, random sample selection so that we represent what is actually out there in the U.S. Smaller streams, large rivers, everything is represented in that random draw. We develop those reference conditions, which allow us to have a bar or a benchmark for determining what is good, fair, and poor. And then when appropriate, we can use nationally applicable benchmarks. This may be something like the human health screening value for mercury in fish tissue, or it may be something, say like the World Health Organization value for algal toxins. But for most of these, we're developing regionally relevant screening values. So if you look at the findings, nationally, 58%, which represents about 700,000 miles of stream, were rated poor for phosphorus relative to the least disturbed reference distribution. And that simply says, compared to our reference value, developed from least disturbed streams, about 58% of the waters had elevated phosphorus. And not surprisingly, where you see phosphorus, you often see nitrogen. So about 43% of the streams were rated poor for nitrogen. This is consistent with what was seen in earlier versions of the National Rivers and Streams Assessment. And I imagine you will see something similar with the last Rivers and Streams Assessment that we've done. And again, those results are pending. So in terms of physical habitat, about 64% of river and stream miles were rated good for in-stream fish habitat. So this represents things like in-stream cover, less sediment, good woody debris, larger rocks, places where fish can seek refuge. 58% had good ratings for the riparian vegetation along the stream banks, and 52% scored good for stream bed sediment levels. And so one of the things we do when we do the habitat assessment is we'll do transects across the stream, and we look at the amount of sediment on the bottom of the stream, specifically by looking at any sort of rocks and noting how embedded they are. How covered with sediment are those rocks? And so one thing you see when you talk about sediment is when you compare the macroinvertebrate condition, you see that the macroinvertebrates are almost twice as likely to be in poor condition when the sediment levels are poor. And that makes perfect sense. If things are heavily embedded, you have less area for the insects. If it's heavily embedded, the macroinvertebrates are more or less smothered out. So nationally as well, we didn't see that much in terms of fecal indicator bacteria. So 69% of the river and stream miles were below what EPA recommends for recreation criteria. And microcystins, which is an algal toxin, that was not present except for just a few isolated cases. So that's good news. EPA has a National Lakes Assessment, and the microcystins tend to show up a little bit more in the National Lakes Assessment. All right, I told you we looked at fish tissue, and I mentioned mercury. When looking at fillets, about a quarter of those samples were above what we recommend for mercury in tissue. In terms of PCBs, about 40% had fillets that were above the human health fish tissue benchmark. And then perfluorooctane sulfonate, or PFOS, this is PFOS or PFOS, it's the same type of compound. Those were above human fish tissue benchmarks in about 3% of the sample population. So the PFAS is really just started with the 2013, 2014, but that was sampled again, I believe, in 2018, 2019. So we should be able to track that over time. So that's nationally. So I pulled some data for a ecoregion that spans both Oklahoma and New Mexico and Texas. And it's the Southern Plains ecoregion as well. Now remember what I just showed you was nationally. It was for the entire nation here. So I'm going to zero in on this right here. So in terms of chemistry, you know, here is our good, our fair, our poor, and it tracks with what we were seeing nationally. About 60% are in poor condition. Same with nitrogen, it's pretty high percentage. All the biologies here, you know, macroinvertebrates actually weren't too bad, 33 and 41% in good and fair. The fish, good and fair, so-so. This 11% here, anytime you see a fourth bar, it represents samples that were not collected. So usually in that case, it means the gear went down or it started raining and lightning and folks couldn't get the fish collected. So I just wanted to really highlight the fact that you can zero in on local, you know, I'm air quoting local, but ecoregional results. All right, so just to give you an idea of what's available, I'm going to show you the data dashboard because this is where you can start keying in on areas of where your program is located. You know, if you're not in the Southeast Plains, Southern Plains, well, I'm going to stop talking and just go to it. So let's go to this. Okay, this is the interactive dashboard. And we have one of these for the lakes assessment as well. And so this, I think, is pretty informative. It's very user-friendly. You know, if you don't have any large rivers that you want to see about, you can do it, and you can do it as streams only. You can select the category, good, fair, or poor. And if you want a subpopulation, maybe you don't want to know about what things look like nationally. Maybe you want to look at it by EPA regions, which actually to me is not that helpful because those are really just kind of artificial lines. Say you want to look at it by within ecoregions, and here's where we would select Southern Plains. You see, once we select that, up here in the map, it shows you exactly the area that you're talking about. If you're out in New Mexico, perhaps you want to go to the Xeric West and look at results for the Xeric West. And there are different options for labels if you want to see what the confidence intervals are around your data. So for instance, you know, this, if you hover over it, it says the good, macroinvertebrates good was 21.2%, and it gives you how much uncertainty, or I shouldn't say uncertainty, but the confidence in that value. So the confidence ranges from 12.4 to almost 30%. And just hovering over these gives you a pretty good idea of what these are. You'll notice that these, in this column here, you'll notice that some of these are shaded darker. That represents, anytime it's darker, that represents a statistically significant change from samples in 2004 to 2013 and 2014. So if you hover over it, it says statistically significant change. So what you are seeing here is a decline in condition. Anytime it's sloping downward is a decline. Unfortunately, we see a little more declines than we do trends upward. So again, if it's the darker shade, that's a statistically significant result. There are other things you can do. I won't take your time showing all these because I think you get the idea, and I highly encourage you to explore it yourself. Right. Wait, hold on. Go. This is what I should have run through. There we go. Give me a second. One second. All right. Thanks for bearing with me. All right, so the data dashboard, again, it's available for the rivers and streams, and it's available for the National Lakes Assessment. Not that we have any coastal states that might be of interest to you, but there's also a data dashboard for the coastal areas as well. Right. So I'll provide this presentation to the coordinators and they can share this presentation with you. I've provided a couple of links here that'll be useful to you. It's got the main page as well. And Philip, I saw your question about QAPPs. Yes, we have a QAPP that everybody must follow, and that is available at the main web page for this as well. So let me see what else we have in the chat. Yep, you're already on it. So we will partner with states, and we have partnered with tribes on occasion. The state partnerships, it's, not everybody in Region 6 partners with us. Oklahoma partners with us for the rivers and streams, and Texas, they partner with us for the rivers and streams. But in terms of Arkansas, New Mexico, and Louisiana, they do not. And this is pretty resource intensive. I mean, I think the least amount of time I've spent at a site to get all this sampling done is about 7 hours. And the longest one I've spent was 15 hours. And usually it's 10 hours. And so we provided training with this. So before every season starts, everybody has to attend the training. And we don't pay for the training. So if you're a program where you may only have 1 or 2 sites that falls within your jurisdiction and you have to pay to go to the training, then at some point it's just a little too resource intensive. We do pay per site sampled. Generally I'll say take home, but what we give is about 5,000 per site. But if you think about the effort to get to the training, usually folks like to have quite a few sites before they consider undertaking those. But in the past, we've had some tribes attend the training just because it happened to be local, and there was no drive for it. Hope I got to that. So this coming year, this summer, we'll be the wetlands assessment. And then the following year will be the lakes assessment. And then we'll be back to rivers and streams. So I think that's about all I have. I'll stop sharing my screen if there are any more questions.
Robert, I don't see any other questions on my end that didn't go to you as well. Are you okay with sharing this presentation with people after the fact?
Yes, absolutely. I was going to ask, should I send it to you? Would that be the best way to do it?
Yeah, either send it to myself or Karen Dye.
Okay, I'll do that.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Robert.
You
Our
bet.
next presenter is Rachel Renz with EPA Region 6. Rachel, I'm going to make you a presenter so that you're able to share your screen. And Rachel, you are muted. You should have access to unmute yourself.
Okay, I think it should be good now.
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, so hi everyone. My name is Rachel Renz, and I'm one of the non-point source technical staff at EPA Region 6. I just started here at EPA last May, so it's nice to have a chance to talk to all of you today. I'm going to be talking about the non-point source program, and this presentation is a combination of slides and information from some fellow Region 6 staff and our headquarters team, so thank you to all of them. And today I'll be covering a little bit of everything, including how to start a non-point source program, how 319 grant funding works, and the activities eligible for funding. So if you don't have a non-point source program yet, you can start thinking about how it could fit in with your tribe's other environmental programs. And if you do have a non-point source program, hopefully there'll still be some useful information. And then there should be plenty of time for questions at the end. Okay, so to start off, what do we mean when we're talking about non-point source pollution? The non-point sources are caused by runoff from rain, snowmelt, or irrigation that carry pollutants and deposit them into rivers, lakes, and groundwater. Common non-point source pollutants are nutrients, pathogens, and sediment, and the sources of these pollutants largely depend on land use, as you can see from the examples on this slide. The pollutants can come from things like agricultural runoff, acid mine drainage, stream bank erosion, and failing septic systems. And non-point source pollution is the main cause of water quality problems in the U.S., with about 85% of rivers and streams being impaired by non-point sources. And since there can be a lot of different sources in a single watershed, controlling non-point source pollution can be a challenge. This is why having some sort of watershed planning process to target priority areas and sources is important for being able to achieve water quality improvements. And non-point source pollution is not federally regulated, so control of sources relies heavily on voluntary implementation of practices and also building strong partnerships. The mechanism we do have to address these issues, though, is Section 319 of the Clean Water Act, which provides funding for tribal non-point source programs. So first, here we'll go through the requirements to start a non-point source program. And it's important to work with your project officer here at EPA throughout this process. And there'll be a slide at the end with a list of the Region 6 staff and their contact info. So first, to receive treatment as a state or TAS for Section 319, tribe has to submit an application providing documentation of the 4 criteria listed here, which are federal recognition, substantial government duties, demonstrating tribal authority over resources, and having programmatic capability. And these criteria are the same as what's required for some other TAS programs like Clean Water Act Section 106. So if you've already gone through that process, you should already have a lot of these already put together. But in addition to TAS, 319 has 2 additional eligibility requirements. And these are to develop a non-point source assessment report and a non-point source management program plan. And these documents are the foundation of a tribal non-point source program. And having a 106 program will also help you out with this step, since 106 funding can be used to develop these 2 reports. And the Region 6 deadline to submit all the TAS materials is April 30th, but applications can be received after that. You just might not be eligible for funding until the next year. So the assessment report is a summary of the conditions of all the tribal water resources. And it basically identifies all the tribal waters that are impaired or threatened by non-point source pollution, and then also the categories and subcategories of those non-point source pollutants affecting those water bodies. And the information from this report, it can come from water quality data that was collected in 106 funds or any monitoring data collected by state or federal agencies. And the definition of impaired or threatened water bodies, it can be based on tribal water quality standards if you have them, or also state water quality standards or tribal water quality goals. And the assessment report also identifies the process that will be used for choosing which best management practices to use. This includes kind of identifying who's going to participate in making decisions, and also kind of listing BMPs associated with non-point source categories. So that brings us to the non-point source management plan. And this document is the plan for how to address the non-point source issues that were identified in the assessment report. So that includes possible BMPs, other programs, and the funding that you're going to use to support the implementation activities. This is where the goals and objectives of the non-point source program are identified, and where you can prioritize pollution problems based on severity or cultural importance of the water body, things like that. And the management plan, it's a 5-year document and includes a schedule of annual milestones for program implementation. And these milestones are important because every year, either in an annual report or as part of a final performance report, you'll need to report on the progress in meeting these milestones. And the EPA region staff use that information to determine if a tribe has made satisfactory progress, which allows you to continue receiving 319 funding. So that's part of why it's important for the management plan to be updated about every 5 years, so you can keep your milestones current. And the actions that are described in the management plan, those become the basis for animal work plans, which is what you submit for funding, and those contain the specific activities that you're going to complete each year. So 319 funding. So once you've met all those requirements and you have a non-point source program, now you can start developing work plans and receiving 319 funding. There's 2 parts to tribal 319 grant funding. The first is the base grants, which any eligible tribe with an approved work plan receives. And that amount is based on land area, as you can see in this little table here. And tribes can also compete nationally for additional funds to implement projects, and those have to be on-the-ground projects. We'll talk about all the activities that can be funded in a little bit. But the request for proposals for competitive funds usually comes out in the fall, and that funding can be up to $100,000. And the graph here shows how the total tribal 319 funds are typically divided up, with the blue being that base funding, and then the orange being the competitive grant. And for all 319 funds, there is a cost share requirement, which is a 40% match towards the 319 funding. But this can be decreased to 10% by requesting that meaning that 40% would place undue financial hardship on the tribe. Or if you have your 319 grant as part of a PPG or performance partnership grant, that can be lowered to as low as 5%. And the main thing to be aware of with the match requirement is that other federal funds cannot be used for that match. And so as you can see, it's kind of limited funding, and 319 money alone isn't going to be able to solve all those non-point source problems. So an important part of the non-point source program is working with partners and being able to leverage funding and technical assistance. So one of the unique things about 319 grants is the ability to support staff who manage non-point source programs. So tribal staff know their local waters and the community needs, and they can work with NRCS, which is the USDA's Natural Resources Conservation Service, or local conservation districts to target conservation programs and be able to meet joint goals with different programs. And from what I've seen, sometimes a non-point source or a tribal water quality person, staff member's salary will be split between 106 funds and 319 funds as a way to leverage those resources. So staff is one of those things that 319 grants can be used for. But the most important thing to keep in mind when we are talking about what is eligible for funding is that any activities you put in a work plan have to be in your non-point source management plan. So that's another reason why updating it is important. And so 319 grant money can support a wide variety of activities, including outreach and education activities, travel and training related to non-point source activities, various on-the-ground best management practices, and also water quality monitoring with the purpose of assessing the success of one of those on-the-ground BMPs. And the on-the-ground projects, that can include things like working with agricultural producers on grazing management or nutrient management, stream bank stabilization projects, and riparian vegetation to address erosion issues, abandoned mine remediation, and lots more. And the image here shows the top pollution sources and types of practices implemented with the competitive 319 grants in the past couple of years to give you an idea of what other tribes are doing. So the top management measures there are stream bank protection, riparian area restoration, wetland restoration, exclusion fencing, and outreach and education. And a lot of times, implementation projects kind of can also be used as an education and outreach tool, since it's an opportunity to teach the community about why the project is being done, or used as an example to show other people how to implement similar practices on their land. So all of these examples are possibilities of what can be funded with 319, but again, any proposed activities must implement management measures in your management plan. And the main thing you can't use 319 to implement are requirements of an IPDES permit or a stormwater permit, because those are point sources. And if you're wanting to implement a project off of tribal land, you just need to be able to show that the project area relates to the management and protection of tribal waters. And you also need landowner permission, which is kind of also why building those partners and engaging stakeholders in nearby areas is important. And so this picture shows an example of different project scenarios. The outlined brown area is the tribal land. The green area is one of the watersheds, and the little shovels are project locations, and the beakers are monitoring sites. And so you can see that projects B and D occur outside of the tribal land, but it could be shown that any non-point source pollution coming from those areas would eventually affect the tribe's water quality as it flows downstream. And also, as you can see by the green highlighted section, watersheds are the basis for non-point source management planning. So watershed-based plans they're not a requirement for tribal non-point source programs, but EPA does highly recommend the use of a watershed approach for addressing non-point source pollution. And a watershed-based plan, it's another type of planning document that you would have to develop for your non-point source program, but it does use a lot of the information that you already gathered during the creation of the assessment report and the non-point source management plan, such as identifying the sources of pollutants and the types of BMPs to use. The difference is that a watershed-based plan, it helps to focus non-point source planning on one particular watershed, such as a watershed that was identified as a priority in the management program. And the watershed-based plan, it can also help simplify work plan development, since you can just identify portions of the watershed-based plan to complete each year. And so that grant work plan would be the specific to-do list to be able to achieve the goals of the watershed plan. So developing a watershed-based plan, it is another place where 106 funds can be used. And like I said, it's using the 9-element, EPA has a 9-element watershed-based plan guide. It's not required, but even if you don't use an official watershed-based plan, using kind of the watershed approach framework for addressing non-point source pollution can still be beneficial. Since a single watershed, it can include lots of different landowners, lots of different sources, kind of looking at non-point source issues at the watershed scale, and then using that to identify and target priority areas for implementation. It can help you achieve success in improving water quality. So we'll just quickly go through these watershed planning steps. So the first step of the watershed approach is building partnerships and involving stakeholders, and having support from all of the partners who may need to be involved or be affected by the plan. It's important for success since implementation of any measures is voluntary. And these stakeholders, it can include anything from other tribal programs like a natural resource program or an agricultural program, as well as any state partners or local watershed groups or universities. And then characterizing the watershed, it's kind of similar to the assessment report, where you're kind of gathering all existing data, and then you're using that to identify the causes and sources of pollution in the watershed. And then that data is used to identify goals and management measures needed to achieve, and the management measures needed to achieve the goal. So for the fourth step here, that's where you finally put together the watershed plan. And at this point, you've already identified BMPs and your overall goals, which you can then use to create a schedule and milestones for implementation, which might sound similar to the management plan, but again, this is at that watershed scale. So those milestones can be used, or they can include things like the number of BMPs you need to implement each year in order to eventually achieve your final goal in like 5 or 10 years. And for this plan, you can also include education and monitoring components, and you'd also identify any technical or financial assistance that you need. And then finally, during and after implementation, you should be continually evaluating whether or not you're meeting those milestones and continue to make changes to be able to eventually achieve those water quality improvements. So here is a list of the tribal non-point source staff here at Region 6. And if you ever have any questions about the non-point source program or 319 grants, your project officer is always a great resource. And then the EPA Tribal Non-Point Source webpage, which is this first link here, has a lot of great resources, including grant guidelines and a non-point source handbook. And then these images are some of the resources that are currently highlighted on the non-point source homepage, which is, it's just epa.gov/NPS for the general homepage. So the National Non-Point Source Workshop was held last November, and that was held virtually. So hopefully some of you were able to attend, but also since it was virtual, that means that recordings of the presentations are available. And what I've listed here are a couple of the presentations that were given by some tribal staff, if you want to check those out. And they can be accessed from the link that this bottom picture can be accessed at that epa.gov/NPS site. And there are always new resources being developed. Like right now, our headquarters team is working on all of the different USDA resources that are available and how to access them, which includes things like Farm Bill funding and the Environmental Quality Incentives Program, EQIP. So look out for that. And so that's the end of everything I have here. If anyone has any questions, and I can go back to the context again, since we went past that quickly.
Okay, I don't see
Okay.
any chats in the chat box on my side. Let me check here with Chelsea.
Yeah, I see a question from Tammy. Yes, there is. Yeah, there's lots of different handbooks and resources for developing a watershed-based plan. Those you can all find on the EPA website. And I can include a link when I send the presentation to.
Okay, so it looks like there
Background.
is a question from Isleta. Is there an example, a reverse example of tribal watershed flowing off reservation?
What was that again?
Is there, okay, hold on. Okay, so there's a question from Isleta. It says is there a reverse example of tribal watershed flowing off reservation?
Yeah, definitely. Let me go. Yeah, so kind of like at the bottom of this where the water flows off. I think that's kind of what you're talking about there. Yeah, I think in general, kind of through monitoring, your program probably kind of wants to assess kind of what's the quality of the waters coming in and then going out, and kind of usually projects that are kind of like down here probably would be harder to kind of connect to influencing the tribe's waters. But I think it could be possible if it was like an erosion issue and there's concern of it like continuing to happen upstream, and just like being able to stop that before it gets worse kind of thing. I think something like that could be possible.
Okay, thank you, Rachel. I don't see any other questions in the chat box for me. Do you see any for you, Rachel, in your chat box?
No, I don't.
Okay. Thank you for very much. Wait, one just popped up. Question was based on watershed plans being incorporated. That's from Isleta also. Okay, so thank you.
For watershed-based plan.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, for watershed-based plans, kind of, yeah, if there's like a state one that's kind of near you, I think, yeah, it'd be good to, hopefully the state's also contacted you and gotten input on it, but I'm sure you'll be able to work with your state people on any watershed-based plans that they have that are near you.
Okay, thank you, Rachel. I don't see any other questions. If anyone has a question after the fact, they can email me and I can forward it on to Rachel. Our next presenters up are Jennifer and Kara. Jennifer and Kara, who will be sharing their screen so I can make you a presenter so you can share your screen?
That's me, Jennifer.
Okay. I will make you a presenter. And then you should be able to share your screen.
Okay, thanks. Okay, can you see my screen, Karen?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I want to thank Kara, Alexander, and Region 6 for inviting me. My name is Jennifer Winterstein. I'm an EPA employee in EPA Region 8. I'm in our Tribal Affairs branch, and I'm a grants project officer for Clean Water Act 106 grants, 319 grants, wetland grants, and PPGs. So I work really closely with our water division. But currently I'm on a detail, 20% of my time, I'm on a detail to Headquarters Office of Water. And I'm working on a great project, and Kara is on the work group as well, representing Region 6. And we are working to update the final guidance on awards of grants to Indian tribes under Section 106 of the Clean Water Act. That's that blue grant guidance. And it was developed in 2006 for implementation for fiscal years 2007 and beyond. So I wanted to make sure that everyone in Region 6 knew about this project and that you know how you can be involved if you would like to be. So currently there are 281 tribes that are eligible to receive Section 106 grants under the Clean Water Act for monitoring and assessment of surface waters. The current guidance, provides really critical information on how to get into the 106 grant program, how to build a, foundational program, and how to expand your program. I thought it's a really well done grant guidance. It has a lot of pictures, it has a lot of tribal stories, it has a lot of examples and case studies from tribes. So I really liked the grant guidance. I thought it was really helpful. And so I approached actually Headquarters and said, hey, if you're ever going to update this guidance, I'd like to maybe be part of it. But it is 15 years old right now, and some of the information is a little bit outdated. Some of we just have a PDF. It's not doesn't have any active links in the guidance. It's available online right now. So Headquarters did feel like the timing was good, and that we needed to provide tribes with a little bit more accurate information, a little more comprehensive, and of course up-to-date information to support tribal water programs, because this is a really important grant program, and water resources are really valuable and culturally important to tribes. So that's the project. We sent consultation letters to tribal leaders on January 13th of this year, letting them know that the consultation opportunity was opening, and that so consultation is open right now. If anyone wants a government to government consultation, you can reach out to me or Kara, and we can work with you. We had one comment period already, which was January 13th through March 15th. We had some informational webinars in February. These were all virtual, of course, because of COVID. But we received, we received less than 20 comments through email and we had a form that could be filled out. We did have a number of questions, Q&A questions and answers through our informational webinars. And those are available. We've already put together that Q&A document, and we'll be putting together a response to comment document as well. And we anticipate having another comment period once the guidance has been put together. And yes, those were comments nationwide. So, and they were largely supportive of our, we had comments. This was not on a draft document. This was, and I'm about to tell you what our, what our comment period was asking. So, but we are, the other thing I want to tell you about today is that we're establishing opportunities for individual tribal representatives to participate in the actual, we have not put pen to paper yet. You know, we have not revised the document. And so we're going to open up opportunities for tribes to participate in the actual revision process. So I want to tell you about the opportunities to comment that we have had so far, and a little bit about what we asked to comment on. So we wanted to have some early engagement, and so we've been working with the National Tribal Water Council, which has tribal representatives from every region, and we've been working with the NTOC or the NTC, which is representatives from every RTOC. So those tend to be the environmental directors or other representatives. So we want to make sure that we can get as much input to address tribal needs and effectively support the development and maintenance and expansion of your water quality programs. So Kara and others from EPA, we put together some areas where we think we would like to change or update the current grant guidance, and that's what we went out to comment on. So and again, as I said, we had in February 2 informational webinars, and just like this one, I'm going out to regional tribal summit opportunities and to regional tribal operation committees, RTOC, in different regions. So again, we put together the work group that we had before the comment period in January through March. We put together some proposed goals of the revision. We want to have comprehensive, updated, succinct language that is relevant and applicable to tribes in our grant guidance when we revise it. We want to have a better description of just the Clean Water Act generally and all the different sections of the Clean Water Act, those that are enforcement, those that are permitting, those that are monitoring and assessment, etc. But we also want to describe and the Section 106 program very specifically. So we want to describe the benefits of water quality program development and implementation. We want the guidance to be practical. That's why we want stories and examples and even lessons learned, you know, from tribes. And we've also been asked within EPA and by tribes for some a little bit more consistent messaging on program requirements, and maybe even to help tribes with how to develop and negotiate work plans for this program. The revision project does not have any impact or will not impact. We don't intend, are not proposing any new policy, and it doesn't impact the allocation of funds to regions and to tribes. So it's just guidance on implementing the grant program. So one of the other thing, one of the key things, of course, for the project, the revision of the guidance is to, we think that the current guidance does provide important content and technical direction for programs, but there's some outdated information. So the work group is suggesting that we update the existing grant guidance and programmatic information and include the technical and scientific content more as addendums, because those tend to be up, those tend to change a little more frequently, and so that way we won't have to update the whole guidance. We can just update these addendums. Right now we do have some supplemental addendums. We have one on developing monitoring strategies. We have one on managing data. We have one on assessments, developing water quality assessments, and there might be a couple more, but I know we do have some addendums already. So one of the topic areas that we asked tribes to comment on, and we asked tribes to comment on anything they wanted to, but we also said we have these specific 4 areas of specific that we think we'd like to approach the revision of the guidance, and we wanted some feedback. So one of them was a structural change to the grant guidance. Currently the grant guidance organizes activities by the terms fundamental, intermediate, and mature. So each chapter that has different activity descriptions. So let's say data management. There'd be a description of if you're starting out a program. These are the data management activities you should strive to become proficient at or gain capacity at. If you're, and then it showed a spectrum, intermediate and mature activities for data management, also for monitoring, also for data assessment, etc. So our recommendation is that we establish a more flexible program development approach in which we can identify common program activities that make up, the foundation for tribal programs, because there's not one label that fits, and we don't really use the labels when we do, grant and work plan negotiation and et cetera, and we don't use it for funding. And we just thought there could be this spectrum, because a program might be mature in their monitoring capacity, but they may be fundamental in their data management capacity, and that's okay. Or they may lose capacity due to losing key staff, and that's okay. So we just thought we wanted to have maybe a more flexible approach. The second topic area that we asked for comments on was this is the way that this current grant guidance is structured by chapters, and it's structured in key sections by 3 tribal program approaches. So non-regulatory would be more focused on a non-point source approach. As the last speaker just mentioned, non-point source, the 319 program, is non-regulatory. It's a voluntary program approach. The other approach is a tribal regulatory approach, which might be tribal water quality standards or tribal water quality codes. And then the other approach is an EPA regulatory approach, or EPA partnership approach, which is taking your tribal water quality standards and seeking authorization for the water quality standards program and getting them EPA approved, so that EPA could use those in permitting development. And also like Section 401 water quality certification. That's a quasi-regulatory program that you get when you get water quality standards authority. So we are suggesting that we remove the structural divisions. We talk about these as these are all appropriate, but a tribe may have a mixture of all three of these elements in their program. So we just want to acknowledge that, and we wanted to structure the guidance. We didn't want to continue to structure the guidance by this non-regulatory tribal law and EPA regulatory or EPA approved program. The third topic area is that the current guidance provides a lot of information about how funds and activities can be coordinated across programs. It talks about relationships to other funding streams like Section 319, the Indian Environmental General Assistance Program or GAP funding, and the Wetlands Program Development funding, for example. The work group recommended that we keep some of that information, but we add general information about the overall Clean Water Act to try and help improve and increase knowledge of the overall Clean Water Act and how all the various sections work together, in addition to retaining, information on how funds can be coordinated across Clean Water Act activities. So not that different, but a little bit more information on the overall Clean Water Act we thought might be really helpful. And the topic 4 was to increase flexibility in the reporting requirements. The current guidance in Chapter 8 has reporting requirements, and it talks about that a monitoring strategy is required, and annual water quality assessments and annual data submission, either to STORET, which is an old terminology where we report to the Water Quality Exchange now, or to your EPA project officer. So the work group is recommending that we have a little bit more flexibility for some of these reporting requirements. That we retain the basic programmatic, retain requiring a monitoring strategy and water quality assessments and the data submission, but we consider some flexibility. So maybe monitoring strategies are developed and they are updated sort of every 5 years. That could be an approach. Or maybe assessment reports are due every other year. Especially tribes that have a lot of authorities, like let's say they have Water Quality Standards Authority, they also have to do triennial reviews of those water quality standards. So fitting in an annual assessment, along with that, maybe, we increase the flexibility. Maybe some tribes are still building capacity to do water quality assessment reports. And so, we could build in some flexibility. We are recommending that we require data submission through WQX, but we put together maybe a possibility of allowing waivers from the electronic submission on a case-by-case basis. So again, maybe tribes who are building capacity or rebuilding capacity if they've lost some key staff. So these are some flexibilities we think we could include in the new updated guidance. So next steps, we are proposing, we have started to flesh out some sub-work groups that would actually put the pen to paper and start doing some revision. And we want to, but we've at the very beginning where we haven't really, I think they've met once to identify how many tribal representatives would be helpful and with how many they would like to invite to be part of their sub-work group. And so we're getting that information and we're putting together a participation opportunity announcement. So it should be coming out very soon. We've just been working with regions and the National Tribal Water Council on this outreach. And we met with the National Tribal Water Council on April 14th, and we got their support for this approach. So we're going to move forward with the announcement fairly soon. Again, I'm on a detail, and so I'm the program manager for this project with Robin Delahanty from the Office of Water and Laura Shumway from the Office of Water. Information about our consultation and our comment period is in the TCOTS, the Tribal Consultation Opportunities Tracking System. And we would really like, and there's a number of different ways. I'm going to go back a slide. There are a number of different ways you can be part of this participation opportunity. So you could, if you want to be part of a sub-work group that actually digs into the current guidance and looks at the language and is working to propose updating the language, we have space for you. We have a lot of, we're going to need 20 or more, tribal representatives to be on sub-work groups. But if you don't have time for that, and we realize that we're about to get into field season, if you don't have time for that, we're going to need stories, we're going to need case studies, we're going to need photographs, we're going to need, we're also planning to maybe have some listening sessions in which we could say, hey, we've got an idea for how to maybe do these waivers for electronic data submission, and we want to have some listening sessions and get some feedback. So there's going to be a number of ways in which you can participate, even if you don't have time to maybe be on one of these sub-work groups. But if you're interested in that, we would really love to have your participation. And you would be a full member of the sub-work group. You would have no more or no less rights than EPA members of these sub-work groups. It's an exciting project. I think it's a good grant guidance. It has a lot of good information, but it's time to update it. But we really would like some participation, and I wanted to come and share that with you. So I think I'll go back to see if we have any, see if I can stop sharing.
Jennifer, if you just hover at the top of your screen, it should pop.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I see. Stop here.
Okay.
Thank you. Perfect.
And I just see one comment.
Okay.
And I think you can see it also.
Yeah. So, yeah, Tammy, yeah, we did not get a lot of comments on our, during our comment period, and most of them were largely supportive. And there were some concerns about tribes that maybe didn't have, had really low bandwidth for internet. And so, loading data to WQX, and so they were supportive of maybe this waiver idea. And we had 9 individuals sort of volunteer already to maybe be part of the sub-work groups, but we don't, we want to make this really available. So we're going to do an outreach, even though we do have some people who sort of volunteered already to be on sub-work groups. We want to make sure that everybody knows about it and can volunteer in whatever capacity. And we're going to use the National Tribal Water Council to as some maybe early reviewers for some sections. They're sort of our advisory group, and so we can use them in that way. So we just have a number of ideas for inclusion and early engagement with tribes. So I see another comment from Josh. Where would we find out more about participating on the sub-work groups? We have a, I'm sure you guys know about the epa.gov/tribal, which is our tribal portal. It's our public EPA space. If you go to, and we can provide this after the call, after the webinar. We do have a website, web page that has all of our consultation information. It has the Q&As from those informational webinars. And so we'll be putting it, we'll be putting a little one-pager that talks about how you can be involved and how you can volunteer. I will be the, the contact for that. But Kara will be also, I'm sure, sending out some information on our behalf, but we have not announced that yet. So you haven't missed it, but it's coming pretty soon. So we're, I would say by the 1st of May or so, the first week of May, if not earlier, we'll be reaching out to all tribes that have 106 programs. And the reason we outreach to all tribes in the nation about the consultation, because there could be some tribes that have not gotten into the program, and this is very important to them. But we want work group members who have been using the guidance or have been in the program. We don't want necessarily all sort of senior staff, if you will, that have worked in the program for years and years. We're also very interested in staff that have just gotten into the program because you know, maybe recently got program authority and maybe you're building your program, and this guidance is very much for you too. So we want a variety of participants. Well, thank you. It was really nice to be able to talk with you guys today.
Yes, thank you, Jennifer. We appreciate it very much. I don't see any other chats. Jennifer, if you want to check your chat box real quick, just to make sure.
Yeah, I don't see anything besides Tammy and Josh's comments.
Okay. And also, if anybody has any questions afterwards, they can send them to me and I can forward them on to Jennifer. Also, on my agenda, I had Kara on as a presenter also. So Kara, I just wanted to see if you were planning on participating or were you just on with Jennifer?
I was just on with Jennifer.
Okay, I wanted to make sure. I didn't want to leave you out, just in case.
That's okay.
Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, Kara. Thank you, everyone, for presenting today, and thank you, everyone, for joining this afternoon. Don't forget, our next session starts at 3 o'clock, and it's the drinking water session, so we will see everyone then. Thank you very much. Have a good afternoon.